Hello, my friends. Welcome back. We're going to keep reading Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. The last time that we read, Ella's father has gone away. She is home alone with Dame Olga and Hattie and Olive, and Dame Olga has decided to make Ella a servant in her own home. And Ella has decided the only person that she can write to for help is her father. So let's read chapter 24 and find out what happens. In my letter, I played on father's pride and described the part of my servitude that would most enrage him, tending the fire in front of the courtiers. How dare they treat me so, and against your expressed wishes, too. They order me about, and the more menial the task, the better. I beg you to come home. Many merchants trade right here in Frel. Why can't you join their number? Please come. My need is great. You know I would not ask otherwise. Come quickly. I am counting the days. Your daughter, Ella. I gave the letter to Mandy to post. Perhaps it would overtake father on the road. The mail coach driver knew him. It might reach him before my earlier letter got to Char. Father could even be back in a few days. Until I saw him or heard from him, I would endure. I stayed out of my stepfamily's way as much as possible, and the longer I worked as a scullery maid, and the filthier I got, the less Hattie and Mum Olga tormented me. I think they gloried in my squalor as proof of my baseness. From Olive, though, there was no respite, and to escape from her, I hid. My most secure hideaway was the library. Although I never dared stay long, I was able to steal half hours reading Mum Olga's dusty tomes. No one ever thought to look for me there, or to visit for pleasure. I don't know whether I was more anxious to hear from father or from Char. I kept thinking about Char and wishing to talk to him. If I thought of a joke, I wanted to try it on him. If I had a serious idea, I wanted his opinion. Although weeks passed without an answer from father, my first letter from Char arrived only 10 days after I had sent mine to him. Then, letter followed letter for the first 6 months of his absence, while I heard nothing from father, and saw nothing of him either. As I had directed, Char sent his letters to Mandy, who pretended to have an admirer. Hattie and Mum Olga were vastly amused at Mandy's romance, but I failed to see why it was more absurd than Mum Olga and father. Char's hand was large and round, the letters evenly spaced, each fully formed, completely unlike my crabby, spiked writing. He showed a balanced, honest nature, while Areta used to say mine proved me imaginative, impulsive, and always in a hurry. Dear Ella, my name has been changed. Here they call me a Chaumont, which sounds more like a sneeze than a name. They can't pronounce Char, and I can't persuade them to call me Char. They are so formal. They say by your leave more often than they say anything else. The Eorthians think before they speak, and often conclude, after lengthy meditation, that nothing need be said. The loudest beings in Eorthian council are the flies. The occasional bee that finds its way in is deafening. I long for conversation. The ordinary Eorthians are talkative, but the nobles are not. They're kind, they smile easily, but speech for them is a single word, occasionally a phrase. Once a week they utter a complete sentence. On their birthdays they grant the world an entire paragraph. At first I chattered to fill the silence. In response I received smiles, bows, thoughtful expressions, shrugs, and an occasional, perhaps by your leave. So now I keep my speeches to myself. In the garden this morning I overtook the Duke of Endona. I touched his shoulder in greeting. He nodded companionably. In my mind I said, the flowers are marvelous. That one grows in Kyria, but the other I've never seen before. What do you call it? In my imagination, he answered me, naming the flower, saying it was the queen's favorite and that he'd be happy to give me seeds. But if I had really asked about a flower, he'd probably have continued strolling. He'd have thought, why does this prince clutter up a lovely day with talk? If I don't answer him, he may breathe in the sweet air, feel the gentle sun, hear the rustling leaves. Perhaps by now he regrets his question, but perhaps he thinks me rude for not answering him. However, if I speak now, I may startle him, which would be worse. It would be worse to have him think me rude. I must speak. But, exhausted by his cogitation, he'd have energy left for only one word, the name of the flower. I'm writing nonsense. In my first letter, I had hoped to impress you with my brilliant prose, but that will have to wait for my second. Not many of my imagined conversations are with the Duke. Most of them are with you. I know what I would say if I were in Frel. I'd tell you at least 3 times how glad I was to see you. I'd speak more about Eortha, and with fewer complaints, and I'd describe my trip here, especially our adventure when one of the pack horses shied at a rabbit and tore off. But then I might turn Eorthian and trail off into silence, lost in smiling at you. The trouble is, I can't guess at your response. You surprise me so often. I like to be surprised, but if I could supply your answers with confidence, I might miss you less. The remedy is obvious. You must write to me again, and quickly, and again, and more quickly. Your very good friend, Char. In my reply, I gave him conversations. Greetings. How do you fare today? Lovely weather we've been having. The farmers predict rain, however. They say the crows are chattering. Ah, well, wet weather will do us good, I dare say. We can't have sunny days always. Life isn't like that, is it? Wish it were. Wouldn't that be fine? Never a disappointment, never a harsh word. Don't you agree, sir? A fine fellow such as yourself, you have sense enough to see it's never that way. In one dose, I hope I have cured you of your desire for conversation. My pen stopped. What could I tell him? I couldn't explain my servitude without telling him about the curse. Then I recollected that Mum Olga had recently held a cotillion. I described it, omitting the detail that my participation had been limited to removing the dirty plates from the refreshments table. Char's reply was that Aorthians didn't have balls. They have sings, which are held monthly. 3 or 4 Aorthians at a time occupy the stage in turn and sing long, sad ballads, or happy tunes, or funny ones, joined by the whole throng in the choruses. The entire populace knows thousands of songs, and there is hardly a mediocre voice among them. Sound gushes forth from somewhere deep, their toes or their souls. For the last song, a paean to the rising sun, because they have performed through the night, they gather their families about them. Husbands and wives and children clasp hands, tilt their heads heavenward, and release their music. And I, seated with the few other visitors, add my weak voice to theirs, humming when I can't guess the words, and wishing my hands were held too. Perhaps we can come here together someday. By the way, you are a month older than the last time I saw you. Are you still too young to marry? I chuckled at the joke. Then I thought of the bride I'd make in a threadbare, sooty gown that stank of cooking fat and yesterday's dinner. Char repeated the query in every letter, probably because my answers were so silly that they pleased him. If not too young, I was too tired to marry, or too wet, or too cross, or too hungry. Once I wrote, if my years are measured by inches, then I am certainly too young. The 11-year-old daughter of an acquaintance dwarfs me. The acquaintance was Nancy, the serving maid. Another time I wrote, today I am too old to marry, 100 at least. I've spent the last 80 years and more listening to a lady detail the pedigree of every dinner guest tonight. The lady had been Hattie, and I had not attended the meal. I continued in a more serious vein. I have not found anyone in my stepfamily's circle in whom I can confide, and there are few subjects about which my stepsisters and I share an opinion. It is great good luck that I have a pen and a paper and a friend. Char's answer. My tongue may wither from disuse here, but at least I shan't lose words entirely, while I still can write to you. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I told Char I was just the right age to marry. With each of his letters, I fell more in love with him. But I couldn't tell him. If I said I were old enough to marry, and his question had only been the continuation of a good joke, he would be horribly embarrassed, and our easy friendship would be ruined. He might stop writing, which I couldn't endure. If he wasn't jesting, it was for him to say so. Until then, or never, I treasured our correspondence. In his next letter, he wrote, I don't know when I learned I would be king. It seems I've always known it. But 2 stories are told, and I've heard them so often they seem to be memories. One has me as hero, the other is not so flattering. A lute was given to me when I was 6, and my sister Cecilia was 4. She coveted it and plucked at it whenever she could. Finally, I presented it to her, an act that signified to the servants that I would be a generous king. They never considered how indifferent a musician I was. My protestations that it was a small sacrifice to part with something I had little use for were taken as modesty, another fine kingly quality. However, I'm not sure how modesty figures in my retelling the tale to you. I do so because I want you to know I have qualities that others admire. What you will conclude from the next anecdote, I cannot guess. I was in the streets of Frel with my father when a man pelted him with an overripe tomato. While wiping out his clothes, my father spoke kindly to the man and ended by resolving his grievance. Afterward, I asked why the man hadn't been punished. When father told me I'd understand by the time I became king, I said I didn't want to be king if people threw tomatoes at me. I said it seemed like a thankless task. Father roars with laughter when he tells this tale. Now I know why. It is a thankless task, but tomatoes are the least of it. The conclusion I drew from this story was that Char wasn't above laughing at himself. Of course, he wasn't perfect. Eager to share his knowledge on any subject, he neglected to ascertain the interest of the listener, or, in my case, reader. He wrote more about Aortha than I ever wished to know. How the guilds were structured, the number of gallons of milk produced in a year by one Aorthian cow, the construction of their manors, and yet more. This was a minor flaw. He confessed a more serious one. You are almost my sole confidant in this. The other is my horse, to whom I tell everything, because he can't condemn or offer advice. I write it to you, because you must know all. I trust you to find the good in me, but the bad I must be sure you don't overlook. I'm slow to anger, but also slow to forgive. For example, my languages tutor had a way of making me feel a fool. I endured his abuse, but learned less than I might have if he'd been encouraging. Cecilia, who inherited his instruction after me, received the same treatment. The first time I found her crying, I warned him. The second time, I dismissed him. Father trusted my judgment enough to let my actions stand. I went further. Boy as I was, I took measures to ensure the tutor would teach no more. But although my victory was complete, and the man was ruined, and 6 years have passed, The thought of him still infuriates me. I'm angry now as I write these words. You may excuse me on the grounds of being a kind brother, which I hope I am, but I wonder at my rage. And I wonder, too, if my action against the tutor was at bottom a case of refusing, in another form, to let someone throw a tomato at me or my family. In reply, I wrote, Mandy says there are two sorts of people in the world, those who blame everyone else and those who blame only themselves. I place myself in a third category, among those who know where blame really lies. You stand condemned. Your crime? Too much zeal in the protection of those you love, a fault and a virtue. Heinous. Although you've revealed your shortcomings to me, I feel compelled to no such frankness. You must discover my faults for yourself. And although you've said it goes against the grain, you must find a way to forgive them. I remember the date of Char's next letter, Thursday, May 24th. He'd been gone half a year. Although the letter arrived in the morning, I was unable to read it all day. At dawn, I had to scrub the flagstones in our courtyard for Mom Olga. Then Olive ordered me to count her coins in their thousands, repeatedly, because she kept thinking I had made a mistake. In the evening, Hattie had me help her prepare for a ball, including plucking out the hairs that grew in profusion above her upper lip. By the time Hattie departed, I was too late to help Mandy clean the kitchen. The rest of the night was mine to use as I liked. In my room, I opened my little window and let the cool air wash over me. Then I lit the bit of candle Mandy had smuggled to me, placing it carefully out of the breeze. I sat on my cot and opened my letter. Dear Ella, impatience is not usually my weakness, but your letters torment me. They make me long to saddle my horse and ride to Frel, where I would make you explain yourself. They are playful, interesting, thoughtful, and occasionally serious. I'm overjoyed to receive them, yet they bring misery. You say little of your daily life. I have no idea how you occupy yourself. I don't mind. I enjoy guessing at the mystery. But what I really long to know, you do not tell either. What you feel, although I'm given hints by the score of my regard. You like me. You wouldn't waste time or paper on a being you didn't like. But I think I've loved you since we met at your mother's funeral. I want to be with you, forever and beyond, but you write that you are too young to marry, or too old, or too short, or too hungry, until I crumple your letters up in despair, only to smooth them out again for a 12th reading, hunting for hidden meanings. Father asks frequently in his letters whether I fancy any Ayorthian young lady, or any in our acquaintance at home. I say no. I suppose I'm confessing another fault, pride. I don't want him to know that I love if my affections are not returned. You would charm him, and mother too. They would be yours completely, as I am. What a beautiful bride you'll be, whomever you marry, at whatever age, and what a queen if I am the man. Who has your grace, your expression, your voice? I could extol your virtues endlessly, but I want you to finish reading and answer me quickly. Today, I cannot write of Eortha, or my doings, or anything. I can only post this and wait. Love, it is such a relief to pen the word. Love, love. Char. So, in this chapter, we learned quite a bit more about Char as a person, and we have found out that he loves Ella. So do you guys think in the next chapter that she's going to write back? What do you think she's going to say to him? I'll see you guys then.